Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello, I'm Rory, and with me as always is Ken. How are you doing, Ken?
I am exceptionally well, Rory. I'm glad to be here. You have tuned in to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. This is episode 127, and we're going to be starting today's episode by speaking about recordings of skills sessions. And there's going to be a super duper download for that as well, so make sure you stay with that one. And that applies to you whether you're a student recording for a simulated session for that to be assessed, or a qualified counsellor recording your sessions to kind of review those sessions if you need to look back on them and to learn and grow. Then we're going into check-in with CPCAB, where today, Rory, you spoke with Kelly Budd, and that was on the topic of reasonable adjustments. Can you kind of give us a feel for what that topic is?
Yes, well, not everybody's equal, we know that, and sometimes people need reasonable adjustments for things like maybe dyslexia, or maybe a learning difficulty, or if someone's sight impaired, or maybe if someone just needs support in another way. And Kelly Budd talks about what can be put in place, what they consider reasonable for a learning institution, or a centre as they called, to put in place to support learners so that they level the playing field a bit.
So needed. And we end episode 127 today by speaking about a spiky, I guess, topic, and that is breaking of confidentiality. But it might be a little bit different to you imagine, because when I'm speaking about breaking of confidentiality here, we're speaking more about when we are required, when we are mandated to break confidentiality, and we have to go ahead and do that. But it's about managing the feelings that might come up for us as a counsellor, and I guess managing fallout from feelings that a client may bring on that as well. So a really packed episode. So let's get straight into the meat of things, and we're going to start off with recording your skills session. And I guess, Rory, if you're doing this within a learning, in your learning journey, you need to record those skill sessions. Your skills need to be evaluated before you can go into practice. It brings up so much anxiety, but there are ways that you can kind of work that increases your chances of getting through this recorded skills sessions the first time, and without all, I guess, the stress.
Absolutely, Ken. And I need to share just a little anecdote in our Facebook group. And if you don't know where our Facebook group is, go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor. You'll find us. We're a closed group. Knock on the door and we'll let you in, and you'll be with thousands and thousands of like-minded people. We have students who are training to be counsellors. We have supervisors. We have qualified counsellors, and we also have some tutors who come in and just share their information. So please come in. And someone was writing about taping a skills session, and I thought it was really interesting. It's a bit 20th century, the word tape, because most of the people now use digital recorders. So yes, recording skills, and it's interesting, isn't it? It's not just students that record skills; qualified practitioners still do it, because as Ken and myself was having an off recording preamble, and he mentioned that qualified counsellors still asked by the supervisor to record their skills, because the learning never ends when you qualify at the beginning of your practice journey. So it's really important, but it can be nerve-wracking, and it can be something that needs a bit of planning.
I like that. Yeah. And that's said with when you say a bit of planning, it's said with tongue in cheek, loads of planning. Here's the thing. If you're a student and you're studying your skills, then you should have some time within your formal studies where you simulate or practice your skills, and you'll do that with a peer, where you will act as the listener for a while, and then they will act as the listener and you will act as a speaker. And this is the grounds for recording your skills sessions. If you find yourself pushing the record button for the very first time when you're being assessed, that's when the issues can come in, because you may feel that you don't know how to work the recording device well enough. Is the recording device working? Is it gonna play back? So you have that kind of worry in the background. However, if you go and record all of your skill sessions, all of your practice skill sessions, then you'll know how to work that technology. It will disappear for you so that when you come to be evaluated, you're not going to have to worry about that technology. But speaking about technology, Rory, there's I guess not all recording devices are equal.
Yes, I mean, in when I first started, we used cassette recorders. So it's Google it if you don't know what a cassette recorder is. But it's very 20th century. And now, of course, people use digital recorders. So the first message is that you need a proper tool for the job. And mobile phones are absolutely not the proper tool for the job. Even though they have a recording function on them, there can be lots of difficulty. They could ring halfway through the session. And really, you don't want any device that's connected to the internet so directly as a phone is to hold confidential information, because it's very, very easy to press the wrong button and send the recording into cyberspace where you can never reclaim it back. So a lot of centres, a lot of tutors will say you must not use a mobile phone to record. Instead, there's a plethora of really good high-quality voice recorders you can buy. And we actually have a page on that. We'll put that in the home page, in the mother page links. If you go to counsellingtutor.com, look for episode 127. We'll put those links in about how to choose a voice recorder. But that's really important. And as Ken said, practice, because I've listened to recordings where people have switched it on and you can hear people going, is it working? Is it on? I'm not sure if it's on or not. Oh, yeah. And then you have about 20 minutes of people talking about whether the recorder's on. So the more you practice, the more you get used to using a recorder, the easier it'll be when you come to submit your recordings for evaluation and assessment.
100%. I'm putting a big red line under that. Know your tech. It's happened. Rory and I taught together, and I've certainly had recorded skill sessions that have been handed in where you can't hear the people speaking because they weren't used to the recording device. It was too far away, or it was on a table that was being bumped continuously. So really do play around with that. When it comes to choosing a recording device, Rory, you said if you remember them, tape recorders, and I think that probably most people in our audience will remember the old tape recorders. I don't think we'll go back as far as putting the skills, writing them directly to wax disc. I believe that was the first ways of recording audio. But you know that the history of recording is rich. In fact, Carl Rogers himself says one of the richest places to learn. And those days the equipment was rather large, very, very expensive, and they would all huddle round the reel-to-reel tape recorders to listen to the skills being used and learn from that. So if it was good enough for Carl Rogers, definitely good enough for me. In this modern age, we have portable recording devices. One of them is called a dictaphone. Now, a dictaphone is not a recommended recording device for a counselling session. Dictaphone is made to be held quite close to your lips. You'll speak directly into it, and it's used for transcribing letters. It's used very often in the legal community where they will speak into it. It's like a microphone. You hold it up to your mouth and you speak, whereas with recording a skills session, you want something that is powerful enough to pick up from a distance. You want it on a table or out of the way, and still be able to pick up the voices with enough clarity. But it's not just the voices that you're looking for there. You want the recording to be of good enough quality that you can hear the nuance in the counselling, where you can hear the breath, where you can hear a sigh that may come from someone. And for that, you need the right recording equipment, because that adds depth to the skills that you're using. So I would suggest that if you want to look around for a recording device, look for a handheld professional recorder. If you use that search in Google, handheld pro audio recorder, you're going to start getting the kind of results back. And you know it's the right kind of tool when you see microphones sticking out of the top of it, because those are microphones sticking out the top, and these are used by musicians. Maybe they will put that down, play the guitar and sing a song, and they use it to see if that's going to work or not, or to record that process. And they need the recording to be of good enough quality that they can hear that, as do you as a counsellor. You need that to be good enough to be able to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of them now that are really, really, really simple. You know, you literally just press a button and they record. And they hold a value as well, reasonably hold a value. You can use it for your college, or you might want to use it in professional life. And if you need to move it on, you can put it on one of the auction sites and get quite a considerable bulk of your money back. But they are essential. There's a couple of other things that we need to think about when doing a recording, and that is to make sure that if we're working with peers, if we're in a class, that we work with someone we've worked with before. Because if you're simulating skill sessions in the real world, you wouldn't record a client on the first session, because it can feel intrusive, and also the relationship's not been built. So my view would be to, if you're doing recordings, try and work with someone you've worked with before, so that you're kind of comfortable in each other's presence, and you're not too kind of overawed by using a voice recorder, which of course, Ken, is the third person in the room, really, isn't it? It's like having someone else sat in the room. It does alter the dynamics, I think.
Does, and that kind of leads me on to a point that kind of just expands on yours, Rory, is do the recorded skill session with someone that you feel comfortable, somebody that feels comfortable with you, someone that you've maybe traveled along a journey with. And I would also recommend, don't let, if it's going to be your handed in recorded session that you're going to be evaluated on, don't let that be the first one you record with this person. And because of what you've said there, Rory, is that the dynamics when you put on a recording device do change. There is now a third person. There's another ear, an electronic ear in your counseling relationship, and it changes the dynamics. So if you record 2 or 3 sessions with this client, maybe even 4 or 5, with their permission, of course, or with a peer, then what will happen is, as you get into further sessions, you'll find that the recording device disappears for them, because they're now used to it. They're not aware of it. They're not monitoring or watching what they say or how they respond. It can disappear. So one of the questions is, if I'm recording my skills, whether I'm a student or whether I'm a qualified counsellor, what should I be listening for? So I just want to give you a couple of things that I believe that you should be listening for when you record your skills. What are you doing it for? Is it to hear what the client says? What's it all about? Well, the reason to record your skills is not for you to understand the client's journey. For you to understand the client's journey, that happens right there in the room when you're with that client. If you're recording your skills, when you're listening back, you will listen to what the client presents, but the work is to listen to, how did I respond to that client? What did I say in the moment in responding to that client? How did I respond to the material? And then, if you did respond to that material, what did you use? Was it silence? Did you reflect back? Did you summarize? Did you focus down? So name the skill. So how did I respond to the material? Can I name the skill that I was using? And then listen as the transaction continues, and ask yourself the next question: what effect did that skill have on the client in the relationship? So from my use of reflection, what did the client do? What effect did that skill have? And then, of course, the most important question of all, what could I have done differently? Could I have done it differently? If I was to go back in and have that same presentation, how might I respond to it now with the information I've had and watching that play out? And if you ask yourself those questions, how did I respond to the material? Can I name the skill? What effect did the skill have on the client? And what could I have done differently? There is such rich learning. I can't recommend it highly enough, Rory. I'm very keen on the old recording of skills, am I?
Yes, you are. You've even written a book about it, Ken. You like skills. Yeah, and that is a really good way of evaluating. You're evaluating, and certainly the person who's listening, your reactions. They're looking at how you pace the skills in and how effective they are. So that's always worth considering. And also, a lot of people are very worried about hearing what their voice sounds like. And my best advice to that is just get over it. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but if you're going to be listening to your own tape, you're going to be hearing, or your own recording, you're going to be hearing your own voice. So it may be useful just to record yourself, just to get used to what you sound like, because we never sound the same in a recording as we do to ourselves. It's one of those very strange quirks of being a human being, Ken.
Is indeed. I've got one final tip as we leave this topic, and that is, if you want to pick up a good quality recording device at a really good price, get on one of the auction sites. So here in the UK, we have access to eBay. If you go on eBay and you put in Pro Handheld Audio Recorder, and just click on the second-hand ones. What it does is it kind of filters and brings you all the ones that have been used that people have bought, they've used it a while, and they don't want to use it anymore, and they're looking to sell that off, and you can pick them up really, really low cost. And the thing about the audio recorders is they either work or they don't work. It's not something that wears out. It kind of works or it doesn't work. So if it's in working order, it's going to do the same job as a new one, and you can pick them up really inexpensively compared to buying new models. So I always recommend check out the second-hand ones, and certainly my recorder that I bought as a student was second-hand. I bought that on eBay, and it's still going today, Rory. It's still got a bit of life in it, and I graduated in 2011. So there you go. The technology's moved on a bit. My one works with one of those memory cards that you put in, and now the technology is that it's solid-state recorder. Ooh, it records inside the device, and you connect it to your PC with a USB cable. Whatever you choose, a message here, record your skills.
Absolutely, and Ken makes a good point. Most of them now have a USB cable, so you can connect them to your computer, because you may have to upload your recording to the college's virtual learning environment. You might have to put it up into that so the tutor can assess it. So always buy one that has a facility for you to remove the recording and upload it.
Like it. So, well, there you go. Recording skill sessions. Moving on to our second topic. This is our section where we check in with our good friends at CPCAB, the UK awarding body. And Rory, you spoke with Kelly Budd on the topic of reasonable adjustments.
Yes, well, our friends at CPCAB, they're an awarding body. And as part of their course suite, they have exams at the end. And Kelly was speaking specifically about leveling up the playing field. So what's a reasonable adjustment? Well, a reasonable adjustment is if someone like myself, kind of dyslexic, you may give people a bit of a break because they may not be able to spell correctly. And depending on how people's kind of neurodiversity is in that, you might want to give them extra time, because some people have trouble sequencing words. Not all dyslexics are dyslexic in the same way, and it may be that some people really struggle with sequencing words or writing. In my case, I can't write, believe it or not. If I write with a pen, it all comes out, and then if I look at it later, I think to myself, what's that? It's a peculiarity of the way I'm wired up. So I would need extra help on that, and maybe ask to use a computer instead of my hand. So that's to make everybody's life easier, because people would actually be able to read what I was writing. And also things like when the exam questions are being asked, sometimes you might need a scribe. Now, a scribe is someone who sits in the room with you and writes notes on your behalf. And I've worked with scribes as a tutor. Also could be an interpreter, it could be someone who's doing sign language. So there's a wide variety of reasonable adjustments. But what came out of the interviews you'll hear is that it's important that students tell the tutor in advance. It's no good getting to 3 minutes before your exam and saying, well, I need help with this, because any help and support needs planning. Some stuff will need to be bought in. If you need a scribe, you're obviously going to have to get somebody in. So the message that really came from it, as you'll hear, is make sure that if you think you've got, think you might have a bit of a struggle in some aspects, maybe writing or maybe retention of information, tell your tutor now. Don't leave it right until 5 minutes before an exam or you've got to submit work. Tell them now, and the tutor will put in what's called differentiation. In other words, accepting that not everybody learns in the same way, and will be able to support you. But it's really important that the tutor knows that, I think, and that's something that Kelly reflected as well.
Let's check in with CPCAB.
Check in with CPCAB.
And we welcome Kelly Budd. How are you, Kelly?
I'm well, thank you, Rory. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. And you've got a very interesting and really an essential topic in the times we live in about making reasonable adjustments, what we need to do to help people who maybe like myself are dyslexic or may have other challenges that might impact on their learning. So from your perspective, what is a reasonable adjustment?
I think from our point of view as an awarding organisation, we understand a reasonable adjustment to be a way of allowing a candidate, a learner with a disability, a special educational need, an injury, perhaps, to access the same level of assessment as any other learner in their classroom in the same way, essentially making sure that the playing field is entirely level, regardless of anything that the candidate might be going through physically, emotionally at that time. So for us, it's about making sure that the needs of the candidate are fully met when they get assessed.
Sure. So let's just take someone like myself. I'm dyslexic. I think everybody knows I'm dyslexic. I get letters regularly telling me that I am, the copy that I've written and things, which we thank people for. So I'm a student, say, and I have dyslexia. What could I expect from a reasonable adjustment on behalf of CPCAB?
It very much depends on the individual. So for yourself, dyslexia can present in many, many different ways and affects people differently. So the reasonable adjustment that you would receive would very much depend on the conversation that you had at the outset with your tutor, with your centre, about how that directly affects you. What does that mean for your learning? Is it a case of speed of processing of material? Is it a case of it affects your ability to kind of visually pick up on text, on documentation? Is it in how you express the written word on paper? So essentially, what is it about that particular kind of situation for you that might mean that you don't achieve in the same way that another learner in your classroom without dyslexia would be able to? And then kind of discussing what the course is going to present to you that might be obstacles to you achieving. So in CPCAB courses, we usually have an exam at the end of the course and external assessment. That is often where learners think a reasonable adjustment might come into play, but it really does come into play at the very beginning, because it will be something that would affect the whole path of your learning. So it might be, I don't know, for you, Rory, do you find it easier to see text if it's on a different coloured background? Does that work for you, or is that not part of kind of how it presents for you at all?
Well, I think it's very interesting. It's not actually. I don't have any problem reading text as long as it's in a font, any cursive fonts like Times New Roman. I just don't like reading Times New Roman anyway. I just get fed up of the fonts. So I just get bored with it. I just want to put the book down if it's in Times New Roman. So as long as they're not cursive fonts, a lot of little fancy bits on the end. My problem may be in sequencing how I write. So, if I write any notes, they make perfect sense at the time, but I have no understanding of what they say when I come to read them back, which is a bit of a problem. So I could have a whole host of notes and have no understanding of what I've actually written. And also it's the same when I'm typing. So if I type something, sometimes it could be a bit jumbled up. And what I usually do is I use a proprietary spell checker now that tidies that up for me. I have a load of red lines and I just click on them, and it kind of takes care of it for me. So that would be the way I present. But you're absolutely right; it's a completely different way to how others may present.
Yeah, and I think things like cursive fonts are quite familiar. So when we produce our exam papers, we make sure that they're in the most dyslexia-friendly font that we're aware of at the time. But it might be that your reasonable adjustment in the class is making sure that your tutor doesn't provide handouts that are in a really difficult to read font. And with things like note-taking, it might be working with the tutor to allow a little bit of extra time in between kind of different topics, just for you to go back through your notes and see if they kind of make sense, or giving you some additional paperwork support notes that they provide. So it really is kind of tailoring it to the individual student. And I think our message is, from an awarding body point of view, we can try our best to tailor the structure and the format of the exam, but it really should match the learner's normal way of working within the classroom. So it really is a reasonable adjustment throughout the whole qualification.
Sure.
So, and often people don't know what works for them and what doesn't work for them. Or they might have an idea, but they want to test things out along the way. They might want to try doing their mock exam with different coloured paper, different larger font perhaps, or having extra time. Having a scribe is also something that we will approve as a reasonable adjustment if it's appropriate. So there's a whole wealth of different kind of adjustments that can come into play, because of diversity. Everybody's a little bit different.
It's very true. I wish I'd known about the scribe. That would have been very useful in my training. But yes, I think that's reasonable. And you know, as a former tutor myself, and I know you are, you know, the conversation, although that can be difficult for people, we acknowledge that saying to someone, "Look, I might have learning difficulties," may be very, very difficult at the beginning of a course. But if it's looked at the beginning, and as you say, you know, adaptations, or as we call it in education, differentiation is put in, then by the end of the course, when those crucial exams are, it's very likely that any person taking an exam, we call them the candidates, but they're people taking an exam, may have a very good idea of what works for them. And I guess that can be transmitted to you at the awarding body, and you can make a kind of decision on whether what works for the candidate is in fact a reasonable adjustment.
Yeah. And I think that is really key. From our point of view, we're not able to adjust the objectives of the assessment, but we can adjust the style, the format of the assessment. So it might be extra time, it might be having a separate room with a scribe or a reader. But one thing we do need is we really, really need centres to be able to let us know early what their candidates need. Because if it involves things like a separate room and they're in our level 3 exam, for example, we need to send them a separate DVD to go with it because they watch a film in our exam. And if we find that out 12 hours before the exam, there's no way we're going to be able to post it to the other end of the country in that amount of time. So it really is about thinking about the needs of the learner from the very, very outset to make sure they get the best experience.
Yeah.
And exams are stressful enough as it is without thinking this is the first time I'm going to be in that room and suddenly I've got a different font paper and I've got a scribe sat next to me and I've never used a scribe before. What do I do with this strange person? So you want to be really, really comfortable with all of those aspects. So all you need to worry about is I'm sitting in the room just like everybody else trying to pass my exam.
Yes, and I'm sure that the tutors listening you know, are well versed in differentiation, and I think a tutor would pick up, hopefully, very quickly in the first couple of weeks or month maybe of the classes kind of resuming, that someone may very well have a difficulty, and take them to one side and say, look, you know, this is what I'm seeing. Can I help? And we'll put some differentiation in. But there is an onus on really the person to, you know, find that courage, because it can be difficult. It can be difficult, and say, look, you know, I think this is what I could be struggling at, and maybe not to be feeling guilty or feel that they're going to be thrown off the course if they declare it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've worked with several adult learners over my time, and a few come to mind immediately that came to my classroom just having believed that they were a bad student, that they'd been told at school that they were slow or they were stupid, and it was never addressed, or it was never identified back when they were doing their GCSEs. And they come to me now, and it's kind of a brief moment with them, and you think, I think you might be dyslexic, or I think you might be dyspraxic. And the weight that's lifted when somebody's able to really understand that it's not the label that's been put upon them, it's that actually they just process things slightly differently, and differently isn't bad. It's not wrong. There's no shame in kind of coming forward and having those really honest discussions with your tutor. Your tutor will want you to be successful.
Yes, and just hearing that, I had a little bit of transference going on there, Kelly, with a conversation exactly what you said, that my tutor said to me when I went back into the class a number of years ago, I think in 1999, when my tutor said the same thing to me, and you know, the relief and the idea that, you know, you're not carrying stupidity and the interjected values of past educational kind of mistakes that happened in the past is immense. And you know, tutors, I would hope that tutors welcome that conversation, because we all want people to succeed and achieve.
Absolutely. And I think there's so many things that have in the past been blocks to people achieving. And I'm really kind of buoyed up by when tutors are coming to us and talking about, how do I do a reasonable adjustment with this student who is in my classroom? They've got a visual impairment or they've got a hearing impairment. And they say actually when they were in school, they weren't able to do the things that the other kids were able to do. I don't want that to be the case here. How do we find a way of making this person's experience the best it can be? And that, for me, when tutors are really kind of willing and keen to kind of think, this is my learner, I am not willing for them to not achieve. How do we do this?
Yeah, and I guess that's when the magic happens, and people really do fulfill their dreams. Well, on that wonderful call to action, Kelly, and that kind of semi-autobiographical or fully autobiographical view from my own perspective, as always, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rory.
Check-in with CPCAB is proudly sponsored by CPCAB, the only awarding body run by counsellors for counsellors. To learn more about CPCAB qualifications and to get more detailed information on today's podcast topic, visit cpcab.co.uk.
That was really useful, and I think it just goes to show, Ken, how much awarding bodies have flexibility in making sure that anybody who comes to study, if they've got different learning requirements, are supported. Kelly did say that they can't alter the criteria. That's, you know, they can't alter the criteria to make the questions easier, but they can certainly make life easier to help people answer the questions. And I think there'll be a lot of people who listen to this probably didn't realise that reasonable adjustments exist. You know, I've met a few tutors who didn't realise that reasonable adjustments exist. So the message is, if you feel you need a bit of support, ask for it sooner rather than later. And the CPCAB awarding body, and I know others do as well, have what's called a reasonable adjustment criteria, and you'll be able to see what they can put in place to help you succeed in your studies.
Thank you very much for that. And I guess big takeaway for me, and maybe the topic of a standalone podcast, Rory, is that asking for help. I know it brings stuff up for me. I went through most of my schooling career refusing to ask for help, carrying it myself and failing miserably as I went along, because I am neurodiverse. I'm not neurotypical. I struggle with dyslexia. I am autistic, and those kind of things weren't picked up when I was at school, so the support wasn't in place. It's a different world now. Key in to the support that is there for you. Moving from our good friends at CPCAB onto breaking confidentiality. As I say that, I don't know what it is. It's almost like those words, breaking confidentiality. For me, it's almost like a pane of glass drops on the floor. There's a shrill sound and a feeling that goes up my spine just with those words, breaking confidentiality. It's the cornerstone of what we offer clients. However, we offer confidentiality within boundaries. It's called limited confidentiality, and it's contracted when you go in with a client of where you need to break confidentiality. And there are times, certainly in my own practice, where I've had to break confidentiality according to the contract that was made. And I know, Rory, that it brought up a whole lot of feelings for me. And that's the topic of this, the feelings that may come up for you. Maybe feelings of betrayal, maybe feelings of guilt on breaking confidentiality.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. You know, the breaking almost sounds very permanent, doesn't it? Breaking. And also this kind of sacred trust, I think. It's sometimes not said in that way between client and a counsellor, where someone will meet you and you'll say within these boundaries, everything you say is confidential. And this may be a very new thing for a client to be able to speak freely about who they are, any aspects of who they are, without judgment, without anybody advising them, just to allow them to be them. But there are cases where we do have to break confidentiality. And certainly in the times I've broken confidentiality, I've felt a mixture of, have I betrayed the client? And also, if I'm really, really honest, fear. If the client comes back, how am I going to work with that? Because if the client does return, and clients have returned after I've broken confidentiality, there is work in rebuilding the therapeutic alliance. And that can be quite tricky. And that needs a real honest conversation from, I think, the therapist to the client. And of course, there will be some times when you break confidentiality. And of course, clients don't return. And that brings up feelings as well, feelings that, you may have failed them. It's very, very complex. But, we do work in here, certainly here in the UK, within the law. If you're working in a placement, you're working within their policies and procedures. And if that's outlined to the client, then, if you have to break confidentiality, you are kind of technically in the clear because you've contracted it, but it doesn't make the feelings any less, Ken.
100%. There's two sides to it for me. There's the mechanics, as you say, the contract that is placed in your first session where you mention the breaking of confidentiality. And if you have that need to break confidentiality, you'll be revisiting that first session with the client, reminding of them of that contract, maybe showing them the copy that they looked over, that they agreed to, that they signed. Those are the mechanics. But the feelings, that's the whole other side. You may be within the law, you may be doing the right thing ethically, but you can be left, we're human. We build relationships. You could find a need to break confidentiality after 12, 24 sessions with a client. The bond can be so really, really have formed. It can be a strong bond. You can feel, I don't want to break confidentiality because it may have ramifications for this client who I now like, because I'm 12 sessions in. There's so much that can be tied into this. And I guess there's danger areas, I think, as well. Danger areas of, I don't feel that I want to break confidentiality because I don't want to trouble this person's journey any further, where clearly the law calls for us, where clearly ethics call for us to break those confidentiality. And and then there's that inner conflict. We have to work to the law. We have to work to our ethical framework. This is definitely something that I would run without passing go or collecting £200. If I don't know what in South African Monopoly, it used to be 200 Rand. I don't know what it is in UK Monopoly. And Monopoly reference, everyone. I would run without passing go to my supervisor. I would be knocking the door down. I would be saying, I've got this, I need to bring it. I would be speaking about it.
Absolutely. And of course, there are times where you don't have that luxury, Ken.
Oh, yeah.
Where there's clear and present danger, as I call it. My supervisees know my term clear and present danger, or harm's way, where somebody shares an intent and a plan to do something, and you just don't have the opportunity to share that with your supervisor. You just have to go off your own gut instinct and act. And I think those can be tough because you just don't have a chance to talk it through. You just have to pull your own professional competence together, consider the actions kind of on the run, if you like, and make a decision. And one thing I would say about breaking confidentiality, it can have interesting ramifications. A good few years ago, when I worked for a charity, one student therapist was very, very upset. She had to break confidentiality because one of her clients had threatened to kill an animal. So someone in great distress there. And she thought it was a principle that you can't kill animals. And to cut a long story short, the police were involved and they had to go to the person's house. And the next week, the client was due to come back, and everybody in the kind of office was kind of hyper aware of what may play out. And what was really interesting, the client actually returned, which was interesting in itself, saw the therapist and thanked the therapist for their intervention. Thank them.
Is. Wow. Yeah.
And the therapist had more trouble with that, with being thanked for breaking confidentiality. But yeah, so sometimes it's, even though it is a sacred trust that's being broken, sometimes it can have interesting follow-on consequences.
Indeed. So just looking at those mechanics of the breaking of confidentiality in your contract, and this is worth thinking about, because you don't want to be thinking about this only when you are now in the process of having to break the confidentiality. Go back to your contract and have a look what it says. And one of the things that I was recommended by my supervisor that I put into my contract is who confidentiality would be broken to. And it may be different. So if it's harm to self, harm to others, if it's clear and present danger of somebody else getting hurt, it might be that that needs to be reported to the police. But very often, breaches in confidentiality, the break, sorry, not a breach, that's something completely different. The break in confidentiality may be that you may report to the person's GP. You're basically handing that information over to another professional to take care of. And that is contracted in your first session. And you might say, what we discuss is confidential, but there are times when confidentiality needs to be broken, and you would give examples of when that was. And if I were to break confidentiality, I wonder if you would be okay if me contacting your GP and you get their verbal consent on that, or even written consent. And if it was present danger for somebody else, I would need to report that to the police. Is that okay? And again, getting their permission, making it really clear what breaking confidentiality looks like in your contract. And then the mechanics of that, if you find yourself in a situation where a person says something in a session, as long as you are not in danger, as long as it's not threatening to yourself, or somebody else may be in danger if they leave and they would go, because then I guess you would just want to hand that over to the police. But if you can, and the opportunity presents itself, cover it right there and then, saying, when we first met, we spoke about the limitations in confidentiality and we covered this and this and this, but I hear you've just brought this into our relationship. And as we discussed in that, I now need to break this confidentiality. And we discussed that I would pass this on to your doctor. And I wonder how you feel we could best do this. And I've certainly been in a situation under supervision similar to that, where the client themselves said, you know what, is it okay if I tell my doctor myself, and would you come with me, or would you be there? I was working in a medical practice, so I didn't have to get in my car and drive to their doctor. I was actually working in the medical practice where the doctor was, but it was all arranged beforehand, and it went very, very smoothly.
Yeah, so I think Ken makes a very good point. Anything that can be done in a co-creative way, where you're working with the client, is always going to have a better outcome than if you just go and do it by yourself. And in the times I've had to break confidentiality, one of the things is I've always broached it by saying, so, you've told me this, so I wonder what we can do about it. And sometimes clients just need that permission for someone to, take charge. It's contrary to counselling, but when it's something really serious, perhaps there needs to be someone who's strong enough just to say, well, perhaps this needs to be talked about with your GP. And I think Ken makes a super point, because a GP will probably have a more detailed history of your client than you do. If the client comes through the door, almost certainly they'll tell you what they want you to tell you. But a GP will probably have quite a detailed understanding of the client, certainly if they've been with the practice a long time. And I can think, when I worked in services, of someone who'd said, I never considered taking my own life, and mentioned it, and I decided that there was a plan there. It needed to be as close to the doctor, and it turned out that this person had attempted to take their own life on a number of occasions, and one, just as the paramedics turned up, brought them back from the brink. So, you have to do the right thing. The only time I would say where it might not be prudent to tell the clients is if someone discusses terrorism, because let's face it, if they're going to attack or blow up a whole area, then you can put yourself in danger by saying, well, I'm going to have to tell the police. So you need to think carefully about that. And there's also They could also be preventing the course of justice, because if you tell the client, perverting the course of justice, because if you tell the client you're going to tell the police, then you may have stopped them doing it, in which case you've technically perverted the course of justice. I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be, but I just put that in there before I get letters in the post bag. But I did go to a course where someone who was training who knew did put that out, that it's possible that you could, as a therapist, get in difficulty there. But the message is, when you have to, you just have to. If it's in the contract and someone is really struggling and they say maybe they're going to take their own life or hurt someone else, I think if it's in the contract, then you have a duty to do that.
Yeah, ethical requirement, if it's definitely, without a doubt. And you mentioned, Rory, that the terrible end of this is people can get hurt or people can die, and we are professionals. We are called upon to do this. Wow. Confidentiality is such a heavy topic, is it not? Something we could definitely speak an hour on. I guess just to leave this topic, we were speaking about the feelings that may come up with you with that breaking of confidentiality. So of course, your supervisor, but it may even be something to take to your own therapy if you find that it sticks around for you and you're unable to shift it. It can... I know, Rory, if I say attachment style and breaking of confidentiality, different people are going to react in different ways under different circumstances. So make sure you're okay. This is episode 127 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Hopefully you will go to our show notes page and download an amazing handout that Rory has created on recording your skill session. It's a little checklist. It's the recording checklist, and you can get that by going to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcasts tab, and go to episode 127. That's today's episode. All the show notes there, all the links out. Link out to CPCAB is there as well, to more information on the topic we covered on reasonable adjustments. You can download Rory's super duper handout, and of course you can see all the notes we wrote on all topics, including breaking confidentiality and managing your feelings.
Yes, and as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.